Well, the date is Sunday, April the 7th, 2024. And I have in the background there um, the words planned humanhood, which should give a clue as to what the topic, I hope, at least, it will give a clue as to what the topic is of today's stream. I was just looking at the time earlier today and wondering whether it was Monday yet in New Zealand. In fact, it's 7 a.m. in New Zealand. It's currently 8 p.m. in Ireland and in the UK, and 9 p.m. in Western Europe, France, Germany, the Netherlands, Spain. And I guess it is midday on the west coast of America and 3 p.m. on the east coast of America. Not that it matters particularly to know what time it is in these various time zones, but this is something that affects everybody. The stats are available for each country pretty much, and they are shocking as to how much of this goes on. Something that's supposed to be only in extreme cases and, so rare and safe, probably effective as well. So again, I want to lead in gently. I'm kind of doing this deliberately. I don't want to spit things out too shockingly, because things are shocking. And the subject matter is one that I know that our overlords don't like us talking about, because it is part of the central plan, really. When people talk about, plans that begin with K and end in allergy, they probably are aware that this is perhaps the main spearhead of that plan. I mean, there are others. I mean, I suppose you can attack it from the other end, right? Two at least of the if it's a trident, which oftentimes things are, they're three-pronged. You have a getting rid of people on one side and then preventing people from existing on the other side. And there's, I suppose, several ways of then preventing people from existing in the first place. This is one of them. Right, I won't preamble too much, but it is necessary to kind of gently get into this, because I'll give more warnings as we go on, but things do get shocking, quite shocking, very disturbing, very unnerving. And, that's for people's own psychological protection as well, because it's important to know that these things really are true, and the barbarity of it. Not just barbarity, again, like stuck in these kind of words that mean what we think they mean now, but don't really mean it literally. So it's not like it's barbarians doing it. It is very gentle looking women doing it, mostly, to other women. Perhaps at the behest of some man somewhere, or some men they assume are somewhere that might be on the board of directors somewhere, but maybe they don't even exist. Maybe there's women on the board of directors. Anyway, I'll try to be I'll try to get a bit more specific now. It'll become clear what I'm talking about, but I have to speak in vague terms, at least in the beginning, to try and get around certain things, because I want to give information to you, and I want this information to be able to stay on YouTube. It's something that YouTube, I won't mention too much, but you understand the way it goes. Now, cast your mind back to 2020 and 2021, and there was a lot of things that I was thinking about, like what exactly makes us human, especially when we talk in terms of our humanity. And if you might have heard people talking at that time about our shared humanity, you might have rolled your eyes a little bit, because the veil might have been removed from your eyes, and you might have realized, really, that is a term that is dripping with irony. Yeah, I suppose there's no real better way of putting it than that, although I want to put it more strongly. I mean, it is dripping with a certain liquid. It is not water. It is very sanguine. I'll just say that. Again, I'm trying to keep things a little bit less sharp than they might get later, as sharp as a scalpel. But back in, and I'm looking at the date now, it was actually, it put me in more of a frame of mind to sort of, from 2020, I had to sort of say, like, and with things like AI coming into the fore, where, artificial consciousness, or at least something that mimicked something that was far more human in terms of being balanced and objective, even though they tried to make it not be, than your average human being was, and comprehensive in the answers that it would give, rather than the partisan answers that a human would. So as well as that, I was thinking of, like, what do humans do to each other? They certainly don't protect and love each other. They don't show kindness to each other. They just s- at the at the smallest opportunity, the slightest opportunity that is presented to them, where they're given the most minute amount of power over somebody, then they exercise that power not to protect people, not to nourish or cherish their fellow human beings, but to persecute them in the most heinous of ways. And they seem to take great pleasure in it, a pleasure that I didn't think that human beings were capable of. But it seems now that most people are not just capable of, but are chomping at the bit to take part in. So it really got me in mind of, how can we, I say, whatever, including myself and whatever bunch is left of us that might remain, who have some of our humanity, whatever that word might have once meant, with regards to having some kind of empathetic feelings to one's fellow human being, no matter how old, small or big, young or old that human being might be, or where that human being happens to be, either in utero or ex utero. Okay, so I think you might know what this is about. I'm just sort of getting myself into the frame of mind here again to start this. This is going to be an uphill struggle, and I don't know if I'm going to be able to get everything done in the way that I would have liked if I could have spent a long, long time recording it offline and chopping out bits where I feel that I've gone either overboard or repeated myself too much, or paused for thought too much, or whatever. This is going to be imperfect, but it's better that I do it this way sometimes than never do it at all. But I might not get everything that I want to say said here, and if so, I'll just have to, or I mean, if not, I'll just have to undertake to continue another time. And it's a large subject matter, so I'm probably not going to get it all covered. We'll see how we go anyway. There's is it Locan Garviel or Locan Garviel? I suppose it doesn't matter too much. But anyway, it's good to see you there, fella. Thanks for keeping me company, at least for part of this anyhow. So, as I was saying there, I had to start thinking about what might differentiate myself or ourselves from what seems to have become, or maybe always was. They were hiding behind a facade of benevolence. What might be, and I would characterize it as a different breed, a different species, even. Because if humans have humanity, what might distinguish me from somebody who doesn't seem to have humanity, either never had it or doesn't have it anymore? And not just to say, oh, I have humanity. It requires that we define what it means to have humanity. And I would say that a working definition for now, one that I've been able to think of just fairly off the top of my head, is to be human means to have humanity. And to have humanity means to have empathy for your fellow human being. In other words, to feel the pain psychologically of another human being that's being hurt physically or even psychologically. To be able to see things from their point of view, or to feel things from their point of view. Not from a emotionally incontinent point of view, or from a performative victimhood status. Oh, look at me. I weep for the children of the world, One of these Whitney Houston breaking into song, like, oh, I believe that children are the future, teach them well and let them lead the way, and I'll stand back because I'm good like that. None of that performative nonsense. Actually being able to look at another human being, and especially a child, And we should be. I thought we were programmed to look at the, I believe it's called neotenous, maybe neotenous features of a child, the cuter features of a child, the larger eyes, the smaller, what's the word maybe for it? Less dexterous features of a child that you might sort of take pity on them and say, oh, they're not able to forage for themselves. They're not able to take care of themselves, even though they're out of the womb. They're not independent. Somebody must take care of them. If the mother isn't around, or if nobody is around to take care of that child, I must take care of that child until the mother or the father comes along. Something like that. If you were to see a foundling somewhere in the woods, like in a European fairy tale, or God forbid, if you were to find a child abandoned in the street or in one of these boxes or postal cupboard doors that I think exist in some either churches or public facilities now. I'm off the beaten track a little bit now, but look, I am talking about having empathy for children and for babies especially. And it seems to me that all it took was a little bit of social programming, social engineering. And they were able to make not just people, but the mothers, the people who could be mothers or are mothers, feel, or at least claim that they feel, no pangs of pity, of no urges, no natural predispositions towards some feeling of empathy towards a child, whether it be hers or somebody else's. Even a child that would be in suffering, either just because it's cold, hungry, or worse, if the sharp implement of surgical steel is coming towards it. I mean, it really is shocking how, not just what people are capable of, but how easily people have been simply hypnotized somehow, socially engineered into having no feelings of kindred belonging, of that kind of empathy where you say, your pain is my pain. Sort of saying, if you're struck with something, if you're cut with something, I feel that pain. I wince with the same pain. I can't stand to see it. I must protect it. I must stop it from happening, even if it's just to prevent my own skin from crawling. Even if it's just a sort of a selfish looking out for one's own psychological well-being that way. It's just incredible how easily they seem to have been able to remove the milk of human kindness from the very people, the mothers and the women of what once may have been the human species, but now there doesn't seem to be very many of them left. Those ones that are capable of feeling empathy, mercy, or pity for their own offspring. So as I say, it got me thinking. I don't want to be beating any pulpits here, and I hope it doesn't come across like that, but as I say, it got me thinking. And when you get thinking, you realize pretty soon that you have to write down your thoughts. One of the ideas that is ringing around in my head quite a lot is that Steve Jobs, as our agreed upon history goes anyway, with that other fellow whose name escapes me now, but anyway, I'm sure Apple nerds will be very familiar with his name, Steve Wozniak, the co-founder of Apple computers. Apparently Steve Jobs said something along the lines of that he wanted everybody to have a computer because it would be like having an amplification device for their mind or for their brains. And I suppose before that, to have a external memory might be slower, might be a little bit more difficult to retrieve, but just a pen and paper or a typewriter, or if you like, the digital equivalent of typing it on a computer, to type down your words, that is important to help concrete what your ideas might be. It is not just important, but it's pretty much necessary in order to be able to sort of say, now, my thoughts feel like it seems like they make sense, but they're not as concrete as they could be. And to make them concrete, having a writing system is essential as the first amplification layer in writing them down, just not just so you can remember what you said, but so you can write it down and then read it back to yourself a little bit later, even, and say, does that still sound like it makes sense, or could it be refined a little bit, especially with regard to a few other paragraphs I've written, a few other collection of words. So look, that's a bit of a preamble there. I see there's Erastus Turnip Seed. Good to see you there, and I know that name as well. Familiar name. So anyway, what I did was I wrote down on my blog, and it's called extrapolations.blog. I don't know how much longer I'll have it there. I'll have to migrate everything over to WordPress, because at least I think that's free anyway, but I pay for this blog. And I just, it's an expense I could do without at the moment, especially for for what it returns me. I wouldn't even mind. I'm not talking about financial return, but I don't know if anybody reads it, And certainly I remember it one time it was easily found by a web search, but now it's not. Even if you search for the very domain name itself, I think. But anyway, look, it's called extrapolations.blog, and that is the URL. And this article that I wrote back in March of 2028, March of 2021, March 28th, 2021. I called it, as a sort of a reference to that rare, safe, and painless, I think is what the phrase from the old Roe versus Wade case was, oh, we'll only do it in the most extreme of cases, if somebody was gang or worded by a gang of N-words, and of course nobody was supposed to actually say that out loud. Only civilized people were supposed to think in their minds, oh yes, well then, of course. Even Shank Uger would say, of course. If you were gang or worded by a gang of N-words, yeah, then's no problem, of course, yeah, we understand that. But you see, if you allow any kind of fringe case in, then they'll expand that. You've got a fissure in the dam, and they'll chip away at that before long the levee breaks, and they laugh at you for ever believing that it would be rare, safe, and painless. So I called it routine, clean, and screamless. And this is why I'm warning you now. I'll warn you frequently now. I put in screamless advisedly there. It is literally screamless, and they make sure that it is screamless to protect their own ears, because it disturbs them a little bit, and they don't like to hear the screams, They find it to be an inconvenience. So I'm going to read out some of this, maybe not all of this article that I wrote. It's quite long, I suppose, but maybe not that long. I might change the picture to illustrate something when I'm going along here, because it's the first picture you see if you would go to the article. Yeah. Okay, so brace yourself a little bit, because look, this picture that I'm going to put up now, it is it's laden with metaphor, and I've sort of put two things there to juxtapose them. And I don't know if you can make it out, if you can read it there. You can probably read the word that's on it, and I'll describe it if you're looking back here. Sorry, if you're just listening, and if this is ever just audio. But if you're looking on the screen, and if you can see it there, you can probably see the word. I'm not going to say it because I haven't said it just yet in this stream, and I might not have to in this stream. Might be better if I don't have to. But it ends in ION. TION. Starts with A. There's a phone number on it. I considered blurring it out, but look, whatever. If somebody's really going to, want to call that, that's up to them. But it literally is a refuse bin. Some people might call it a rubbish bin, a dust bin, a litter bin, a garbage can, garbage pail. And as is often the case, on these city bins, I don't know what's the best word. Garbage can, for Americans. Is that really what we say, garbage can? I'm not even sure if people say garbage can, on both sides of the West, or sorry, both sides of America. Anyway, I happened to take that photograph in Johannesburg in South Africa. You might go, "Oh, I breathe a sigh of relief as long as it's only happening to them." No, 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 no. It's not happening to them exclusively. It happens everywhere. But I know, like I said earlier, in some of these cases rather, people might go, "Oh, as long as it's only happening to them," and in their mind's eye, they have a certain image, and they go, "Oh, that's fine." You see, an injustice happening to anyone anywhere is an injustice happening to all. I say that, and you can be sure I do have what you might think are contradictory ideas in my head. Yeah, I sure do. I sure do. But here's how it's not a contradiction. I don't want things to be hidden or things to be done in an unnecessary, cruel way. If there is to be a competition amongst different groups of people, let it be done honorably and honestly, not against the weakest of them, the ones who can't fight back. Let it be a fair fight. Let it be an honorable fight. There's no honor in this. But I'm sure it's not lost on you, but I'm going to make sure that nobody, even in the back seats who cannot see the picture on screen now, is missing the huge symbology here going on. That oftentimes, what they say, don't post bills, meaning advertising. And I'm telling you that in Johannesburg, I've driven all over the city, pretty much in every. And actually, it kind of amazed me that there are so many litter bins or garbage cans like this. And on every garbage can, there is an advertisement like that for this procedure or this service. And that is a cell phone number. I mean, you wouldn't even like, and by the way, on the same bins, there are these adverts, you might have seen them in your city as well. We buy any car. So on the other side there, or go around 90 degrees, there's an advert for, doesn't matter what condition your car is in, what condition your vehicle is in, uh, even if it doesn't run, we'll buy it. And another cell phone number. It's probably the same guy, you know. Uh, so just call this cell phone number, and what it says is, pain free. Call this number, pain free, and then as well, like so you're getting something into the deal. It says free cleaning. Isn't that nice? So you don't have to go home and clean it all up yourself. And I'll try not of this. I was going to say something there like that it was a little bit crass. I'll hold off. But it would have been very apt. I mean, it would have been appropriate, but not appropriate if I had have gone there. Because we should not shy away from the realities of what this is and what these people are doing. And whether it is in Johannesburg in South Africa, or whether it is in a clinic in Los Angeles or San Francisco in California, it might look a little bit more pristine and clinical and all that in LA or San Francisco. But I am telling you that it doesn't change the sordid nature of it. And they actually, behind their sort of procedures and their clinically clean implements and their Latin medical verbiage for the various parts which they're dissecting, it doesn't make it any less gruesome. I haven't even got to the article yet, but look, I'm just speaking off the cuff here. And I wouldn't have been necessarily this honest, this candid, this frank, if I hadn't gone live. I would have recorded it and said, better edit that down, check to see if any of it's a bit beyond the pale, I've gone a bit overboard or a bit unsafe for this particular venue, the way. I'll pause for a moment before actually getting into the article proper and just read a couple of comments here. Cheers, Loken. Erastus Turnip Seed says, the Bible states that the saved all have their names written in a book. Yes, and I think that is something that is a significant feature. And I think that might be an Old Testament thing. I think that is something that all the Abrahamic religions might believe. And to me, it has the ring of truth to it, although I don't fully understand it. But anyway. And Loken says, I have it bookmarked. I think that's referring to my article. Okay, good. Thank you. Pass it on, just I'd like people to read it. That's all. White's telescopic philanthropy got exponentially worse with the suffrage movement. It certainly did. And I think we probably all know, again, that every single time you look into any topic, such as the suffrage movement, there's something that we discover. WTF, said Erasmus to something that I said about 5 or 6 minutes ago. Anyhow, I tell you what it was. It would have been just with regard to the crassness of saying call this cell phone number for a quick and cheap 2-for-1 type of one of these procedures, from a guy on a cell phone. Right. I'll leave that picture up there while I read from the article anyway that I wrote back in March of 2021. They use clinical words like calvarium for skull and thorax for chest, instead of any humanizing words, which might cause the clinicians to feel troubled while they go about their business of dissecting the fragile little bodies gestating innocently in their mothers' wombs. Now, I'll have to do another stream on this because there is a video of some, I presume she's an elder nurse or doctoress, and she's in one of these clinics. I think probably in either San Francisco or Los Angeles. And she is giving it's a bit like a TED Talk, some kind of lecture. But I don't think it's actually a TED Talk, but who knows? And she's telling, I assume, some other interns or maybe a pep talk to some other practicing nurses, or it could be doctors, doctoresses. And she's telling them that in the most gruesome terms, I won't repeat it now because there's other things to go on here, about sometimes some things happen while she's performing these procedures, and it slightly disturbs her. And then she remembers to always look on the bright side of life or something like this, and has a little bit of a chuckle, a little bit of a laugh. It's all a bit of a laugh. And she induces what at first might seem like a nervous laugh from the people, maybe from the audience she has. Maybe that's all it was. I don't know. But you could also maybe think that it's the braying of laughing hyenas. But look, I can't look into their souls, but I'll get that video for another time and we might have a closer look at that and see if we might be able to use body language or statement analysis to see if we can make an educated guess, a best guess as to what their mindset might be like. Whether they have simply accustomed themselves to the horrors that they do so much that it doesn't affect them anymore. They've become numbed to what they do, or whether they really enjoy it and always did, whether they are actually sadists. I actually think that's more likely, but anyway. Okay, getting back to the article here anyway. The use of terms any less clinically taxonomic than fetus might call to mind that they are dissecting a human baby, not an insect. And these people know well what they are doing, but they use weasel words to avoid awakening their own anesthetized consciences and specious reasoning to absolve themselves of personal responsibility. Their body language shows awareness of guilt, but they suppress their shame and express no remorse. What I'm referring to is the corporate industry of monstrous proportions, which enables women to become unpregnant while they sell the residuals on the open market. This was all supposed to be safe, legal, and rare. Yet now, with hundreds of thousands of I'll just say the A word, every year in the United States, and more than 42 million abortions worldwide in 2020 alone. It is a routine destruction line of grotesque proportions. Now, I've said in brackets here, again, there's a word that I can't say on this particular venue here. Compare that number to the 1.8 million. So compare 42 million A words in 2020 alone, A word procedures, which made women unpregnant, got rid of a little problem there that was growing in their uteruses. And just a clump of cells, just a routine flushing. Now compare 42 million of those to the 1.8 million, or there could be another number that's 4.2 million in excess of that. Compare it even to that if you like. But just compare it just for now to the 1.8 million who are claimed to have died, from the VidCon convention in 2020. You know, we were all supposed to say this is the worst tragedy, even if true, even if what they were saying was true, it was the worst tragedy. And that was 1.8 million. So how many times does 1.8 go into 42? Something like 25 times maybe. You know, but I mean, again, you know, anytime you try and bring, you know, logic, let alone calculus or math into these things, then they go, oh, you're just one of these people who use, you know, European math against people. You know, we don't care about your math. We'll make up our own. You know, 2 and 2 doesn't have to be 4 if we don't say it has to be anymore, because you're not free to say that. I'll just take a little break there. I'll read out a couple of comments here. Erastus Turnipseed says, life becomes morbidly cheap in a godless, secular society. Absolutely. And he says, I wonder what they use the waste, in inverted commas, for. Rituals? Yeah, I would say so. I mean, again, all these things that people used to think were crackpot theories are now not only pretty much bang on the money, but they often don't go far enough. They often do not spell out the full horror and absolute intentionality of all of this. The soft language, as a famous comedian once said, that was George Carlin, wasn't it? You know, and again, I wouldn't have thought that it was possible, but he did lay it out in a funny way. But he got people to think, maybe, hopefully, realize that it wasn't all that funny at all. That if you just create these euphemisms for things, you know, like say, oh, it's just a routine flushing of unwanted cells from a uterus, and people go, well, yeah, that sounds lovely. Who doesn't want a routine flush of their uterus? You know, whereas if you talked about scraping out the insides of somebody's womb with a scapula, then people might go, oh, that sounds a bit too sharp. That's a bit too on the nose or on the cervix. You know, it's all about how you say it. And the stupid people kind of go, oh, that sounds lovely. I'll have 2 of those, please. If you just put it in nicer language. Routine flushing? Oh, yeah. I'll have one for me and my mom, please. Okay. Erastus Turnipseed says, I sometimes imagine God becoming wroth as he watches these clinical technician high priests destroying the unborn in these unholy procedures. Yeah, well, look, maybe if God exists and he's made a deal with the devil to say, listen, it's all on you now. Run it how you want. And, the people have said they don't need me anymore. So I won't interfere then. Let's see how it turns out. I think for lessons to become indelible, he has to allow humans to do what they're going to do to themselves and suffer the pain of the damages they inflict on themselves. It's not a case of don't interfere with your enemy while he's making a mistake. But unfortunately, mankind, I say that in the loosest of terms, because whatever mankind is, I don't consider myself to be part of it anymore. Either most of the people are members of mankind and I'm not, or vice versa. But I'm not trying to exalt myself in any way. I just don't want to be part of them. And I've said it a few times and now I'll say it again. If God exists and there's a heaven and God will forgive all these people and, they'll say sorry and whatever, not just about this particular topic, but about everything. If they go, oh, I'm sorry, let me into heaven. Like all that is just, again, it's going to be self-interest. Oh, I'm sorry now for what I did, but can I get into heaven now? Oh, I'm sorry, I repent. Like, I don't want to share heaven with any of these people, right? If the only alternative is hell, then that's where I'll be. I do not want to have any kind of society with these people. They're only sorry when it affects them. Erastus says, Satan preventing souls from entering this world. Excellent point. He says, well, there's a little bit of delay there, so I can't quite remember what I was thumping the pulpit about just there. But anyway, I appreciate it. I'll get back to the article now. I tell you, before I get back to the article, I'll change the picture to a picture that is similar to what would be now at this stage in the article. And let me see if I can get it up here. I don't know if anybody remembers a game. If you ever see, some people might even be old enough to have played the PlayStation 1, as it's known in hindsight, the first PlayStation. And one of the first games, I think it might have even come on the demo disc that everybody got with the PlayStation as a demo game where you got to play the first level or something like that. And it was called Abes Odyssey. And it was the story of an alien. And if you look back at all these things, I mean, movies and video games, even back then, tried to tell us very foundational truths. And what this alien discovers as you climb through the sort of parallax scrolling 2D platformer game is you discover that as you climb through what is some kind of factory, you've climbed out of your it's very like the Matrix. You've climbed out of your pod or your whatever receptacle that he's in. He's broken free of his receptacle, and the mission is to try and unlock and set free his other alien friends. I forget, maybe that there's a word for the type of creature that he is, Abe anyway. So it's to free his other fellow aliens, but whatever they are, and then to leave the factory. And it's only when he gets out of the factory that he realizes, this was basically turning his aliens into some kind of dog food or whatever, some kind of chum or churn. And it had a sense of humor, a bleak, dark sense of humor, a black sense of humor. So the factory was called Rupture Farms, which is I think the word for it is onomatopoeic, I think anyway, where it sort of sounds like what it's describing, like a rupture. Doesn't sound like a nice thing to have, You definitely, even if you'd never heard of the word rupture, if you were, I have a feeling it's probably a Germanic word, but if you were French, if you were Italian and somebody said, would you like a rupture? Rupture. As long as they didn't confuse it with rapture, they'd say, no, it doesn't sound like a good thing. It sounds like a visceral, punching, shredding, tearing type of a thing, a rupture. So Rupture Farms is an aptly named industry, and it's dark. You can see the smoke billowing from all the the chimneys there. And the whole thing is just a dystopian vision of sort of clouds that are grey and full of ash, and the sunlight has turned to a sort of a purple red colour because of all the smoke and soot in the air. And there's just all these industrial pipes and trolleyways and train tracks, and I suppose it might be reminiscent of other things that have train tracks running towards it. You know what I mean? It probably does invoke the big H word, you know? But maybe not in exactly that way, but in sort of saying, listen, if you thought the H word was real or a big thing, you ain't seen nothing yet, you know, because it's not only going to happen to, like, whoever tries to perpetrate it. It's not going to just happen to one aspect of it. Like, you know, it's going to happen to everybody. There will be blowback for all this. And usually what you find is that everybody ends up being hoisted on the same petard. Everybody ends up having the weapon they create being directed against not just them, but against everybody. You know, I saw a video recently. It was, I forget the fella's name now, but it was, I must try and find a way to publish it more on YouTube, because it's from a guy whose first name is Ernest, and I can't say his surname now, but it begins with a Z or a Z if you want to say it that way. And I suppose, yeah, he was German as well, and he lived in Canada for a while, and he married a Mennonite woman, as far as I remember, who was American, but he got deported from America to Canada and then to Germany. You might know who I'm talking about from that, anyway. But he was interviewing a fella, and he didn't feature much himself in the interview, but this fella he interviewed, like, he sort of said, like, you know, we destroyed ourselves over and over again in these cycles because we could not get rid of this kind of inherent insanity. I can't remember exactly how he put it, but we couldn't eradicate or expunge this kind of insanity from ourselves. Now, it sounds like I'm broadening and generalizing the problem here a bit too much and sort of saying we all suffer from this. I mean, it would be setting myself up for a pride before a great fall type of situation if I sort of said, oh, not me, I'm not insane. I don't have any sort of bouts of insanity or flights of ill-advised fancy, or I haven't done anything that was either not just stupid, but cruel even, or thoughtless, let's say. Maybe I have, and I probably have, you know. But by and large, there does seem to be let's call it, maybe we could look at it in the terms of genetics and epigenetics, that maybe everybody has the kind of possibility somewhere in their genetics. Maybe some people have more preponderance for psychosis or hysteria in them. And then whatever might be in the environment might trigger that more. And surely we can see that there are people who don't have much sort of natural immunity, natural psychological or mental or spiritual immunity, however you might want to look at it, from the kind of media onslaught that we have, where it's definitely designed all of the things that we have on our TV and on our main social media sites and movies and all what passes for popular culture is designed to break people's psyches, to bring down whatever thin barriers they might have against going insane. And one of the methods, by the way, is the CIA methodology called the Kubark methodology, where it is to constantly bombard you with contradictory information so that you can't handle it anymore and you go crazy. And then the easiest thing to do, because you know you don't have any sort of rock to hold on to in this sea of madness, so you just sort of say, well, what is the most popular opinion on this, that, and the other? Okay, it seems to be this political party, or it seems to be this particular social media movement or whatever. Right, I'll be part of that. Seems to be part of this, not just social media, but social movement. Yeah? And you know the ones, I won't enumerate them. Let me be part of that group then. And they'll tell me what to think and do. Far easier than having to root out the logical contradictions in your own mind and prevent yourself from going insane, you know. I'll take a little bit of a break there from pontificating again. I never mean to pontificate or, you know, pound the pulpit, metaphorically speaking, of course. like this, but it's probably for the best overall. It's not going to be perfect. I'm not going to be exactly saying the things that I want to say in exactly the way I wished probably later that I would have said them. But at this stage, something is better than nothing. What difference do I hope that it'll make? Very little, but if there is a God, he would be disappointed in me if I didn't at least try rather than do nothing for a long, long time. And I have bouts of this still. Say, nothing matters, nothing's going to change, and I can't change anything, and nobody deserves any better anyway. And I just want it all to be over with because it all is so effing tiresome, isn't it? But if there is a sort of end of days scorecarding and you tot it up and somebody looks at you and says, God or whoever, like, you were on the field of play. Why didn't you at least try to go for the ball? I don't want to be like somebody who's whimpering and moaning saying, oh, but it was too difficult and I had no voice and nobody would listen to me. Maybe not. At least I want to be able to say, well, I bloody well tried occasionally. And again, even if it doesn't make any difference, for whatever future there might be, maybe someday somebody might hear my voice and kind of go, oh, yeah, well, checks out. It did happen. It got worse, in other words. Did I read this out? Satan, preventing souls from entering this world. Yeah, very much so. I've thought about that aspect of it. As far as this particular procedure goes, did I read that out? I sometimes imagine God becoming wrath. Oh, yeah, I did, yeah. He says men go crazy in congregations. Yeah, I mean, that explains, the whole sheep and the cattle thing and my flock and all this sort of stuff, and why it is so easy for con men to get their hooks into people, whether the con men are those kind of religious preachers that we see so much, particularly in the American evangelical ministries and super churches and those kind of things. That kind of thing goes on in South Africa as well, I can tell you. Everybody, not everybody, but I'm using hyperbole, but there seems to be a lot of people, of all colors, hitting on the idea of setting themselves up as a pastor, a pasta, or a preacher, And also, I don't know if you've noticed this trend since the advent of social media and in particular Instagram. There seems to be a lot of life coaches operating on Instagram. Same stuff, different name. Slightly different garb and slightly different rituals and liturgy. There's Lily Gazoo. Good to see you there, Lily. Hello all. Erastus says, Christ often retreated to a lonely place to recharge. Yeah, that's true too. I've often felt like being out in the desert and saying, geez, devil, I wish you'd come along and tempt me just to only keep me company. Not that I'm comparing myself to Jesus, but Lily says, I'm still building the off-grid library. That's a great project to have. Encyclopedia Britannica, the Harvard 5-foot shelf of classics, helping old people downsize. I get the books. Very good. Wow. Excellent. I hope you've got a good place to store them. Good idea, Lily, says Erastus. Books hold knowledge and they can't censor or rewrite. Exactly. It's great, isn't it? Okay, I'll get on with the article a little bit. And then for a change of pace, I will show you some videos. And I'll explain a bit more about who is producing the videos. So with that picture of Rupture Farms there, I'll just read out what I have as the text immediately below. I forget what it's called. There's a special name for it anyway. The descriptor below the picture. So Oddworld, Abes Odyssey. Abe discovers the terrible truth about the industrial meat packing factory called Rupture Farms and tries to set as many of his fellow Mudokons free. And there you are. That's the word for his fellow people. I tried to wonder whether there might be something meaningful in that word Mudokons, Mudokons. Maybe it's an anagram. Maybe Mudokons means something. If anybody has an idea or knows, I'd be interested to have any insight into that. Um, because it is always fascinating when you realize, oh my God, they tried to tell us and I didn't have ears to hear. Anyway, his people have a rich history and culture, but have been slowly transformed into a slave race, leaving many who are born into captivity largely ignorant of their past. Does that sound familiar? The glucons, a species who covet power and money and lack any morals or restraints on achieving their goals, run Oddworld's most prominent companies. Now, we will be getting into some of the more graphic stuff, as in video, and as well as like it is graphic in the sense of it's gruesome. So be forewarned. So, a warning to anybody, to anyone, before watching these testimonies. And I'm speaking about myself here, I'm a man who has invested a lot of effort towards the goal of maintaining control over my emotions, because I'm not particularly stoic. And I've got many negative emotional qualities. Like I tend to give up too easily. I tend not to persevere, and I tend to not even try at all. I tend to give up before I've tried and say, oh, it's too difficult. Everything is set against me and there's no point in even trying because as soon as I do, they'll only shut me down or whatever. So, and that's not the least of it. Not that's not the all of it, but that's at least what I can think of now that's pertinent to what I'm just saying there. So don't think for a moment that I'm trying to set myself up as some kind of bastion or example of stoicism. Anyway, getting on with the article here. Yet, watching these made me weep for humanity and filled me with a rage so great that I wanted to trade my soul for a chance to see how these same practitioners would react to the experience of live dissection from the recipient's perspective. I imagine anyone who hasn't surgically removed their sense of empathy will feel similarly. Now, I am not advocating for anything, however, other than that you prepare yourself for a distinctly unpleasant realization, not only about how disgustingly callous and morally decrepit they are, but also to realize that this is our world, this is our global society, and that it has been going on for generations now, masquerading under such perversely euphemistic terms as pro-choice and reproductive rights and equal access to health care. If you are still human, you will be sick to your stomach. Now, we are going to get into more and more nitty-gritty details here. So steel yourself, be forewarned. Don't complain that I didn't, sort of warn you that there are going to be very unpleasant realities. Both ones that it's often worse when you conjure them in your own mind. The images that your own mind creates in the sanctity of your own inner thoughts, wherever you hold your own presence of mind. Actually, a trick that they know very well is that creates images more gruesome than they could depict or paint on screen. That's why the best horror movies leave the worst of it off screen. You might hear what's going on, but your mind paints in the picture. And it's more effective than any of their special effects. Anyway, we'll get on to video. But again, the words here might be disturbing. Okay. And just for me, what disturbs me most is just how businesslike they are about it. Okay, so for their business model, they need certain parts whole and intact. And they also need them living. They need them perfectly fresh. So it is much easier to ensure that this is achieved by separating these parts outside of the womb. But this brings in certain legal obligations and mandates and restrictions that they need to tap dance around. The organs need to be kept alive with natural blood flow for as long as possible. Therefore, it is desirable to deliver the baby whole and alive before dismemberment. These people know what they're doing, and they feel they can absolve themselves of moral responsibility with their asinine legalese type wordplay. They laugh. They actually titter to themselves. They're amused about how clever they are, about a checkbox which they tick on a form in advance, which says that as long as they claim that they didn't intend to dismember the baby after they deliver it alive, then it's not their fault that they do exactly this. They actually seem to find it amusing that playing this little bureaucratic game of following the procedure allows them to do what they like. And they do like it. They like it so much they boast about it. What could be wrong with these people is that their egos are so large that they simply have no room left for empathy. That's probably not such a surprising concept to a lot of us these days. As people's pride in themselves has been inflated, so the milk of human kindness has dried up. So again, about these videos now, which I think we're going to be getting onto soon enough. I will understand if you don't want to watch, but you should do your best to override your natural revulsion to these horrific acts so that you are aware of their attitude to what they do, their own attitude to what they do. They seem to be not only unapologetic and unrepentant, but actually quite pleased with themselves. One of them sounds proud about how effective their procedure is in preserving the valuable parts intact. And they also seem to think of themselves as innovative for having thought of cutting out the voice box of the fetus first, so it won't be able to scream while they make subsequent incisions. I'm going to pause on that, and I'm going to maybe repeat it and allow that to sink in. They seem to think of themselves as innovative for having thought of cutting out the larynx of the fetus first, so it won't be able to scream while they make subsequent incisions. Yeah. Now, how we know this is because people like this woman here, the name is kind of on the screen, but I know that that's one of the things they don't want people to know. So I won't say the word. I won't say her name, but you might be able to make it out on the screen there. But she was deposed under oath, and that was in 2019, as you can see there from the court recording. And she was also recorded in secret at these kind of junkets or business symposiums where these people get together with businesses that want to purchase these parts, whole or intact. And I'll get onto a bit more detail, I suppose, on the who's and the whats and the wheres and the whys, but I'll just say that that was 2019, and current year, 2024, there is an ongoing case in San Francisco between the person who recorded, or at least the guy who started the organization where people recorded uh, these people talking and, talking, thinking they were talking to potential clients. So telling them, in flowing, glowing terms about what they can do for them and how experts they are at it. And he is having a court case which is being heard in San Francisco by the judge, who apparently, according to what I think that I understand from what he's said and what he's written, and I think also Marjorie Taylor Greene is involved in this recently, has sort of maybe brought extra publicity to this. So the guy who set up one of these planned, what hood centers in San Francisco, he is a judge in San Francisco, and he's hearing a case where the planned something hood centers are trying to prevent him, and so far have succeeded, because I've seen that he's had to take down some of his videos, even some of his shorts, in censoring not just the video, but even, it seems, audio from some of the videos that he has recorded. So they're very proud of what they do, but they don't want people knowing. Now, the people might not think it's such a lovely thing anymore. Isn't it amazing? So that's going on in right now in 2024 in San Francisco. And I mean, you would think, if the justice system was a justice system, you would think that would be an obvious case where there is a conflict of interest, and that the judge would, of course, as Cenk Uygur might say, want to recuse himself if it was a real justice system, or if he was even interested in, anybody, presenting to anybody any kind of thin veneer of impartiality or, unbiased type of proceeding going on. He'd say, hey, listen, I'm personally involved here. I can't hear this case. It's astounding, isn't it? Now, if I'm wrong in any of those details, I'll come back and correct it. But that seems to be what's the situation at the moment. Just incredible, isn't it? I'll pause for a moment here and just see there. We have, I'll say, a minor celebrity. I don't think you'll be insulted by that. A celebrity in these kind of circles. It's an honor to have him just heart your comment or come into your stream and say, sup dudes. So hello, Bianca. And Lily says, not talking about Bianca now, just about the people in these centers. He says, or she says, these people are without souls. Yeah, I mean, I have thought a lot about the idea of a soul and whether there are spirits and whether there are souls. All of these things, whether we want to use the word a personality or the thing, the character, the thing that animates us, that gives us consciousness. The thing that whatever, even if we can't define what it is or point to it, whatever differentiates us or me, myself, or we ourselves from AI, I think it's getting ever more and more important to sort of say to yourself, well, I'd better start thinking about whether there is a soul and whether there is such a thing as a spirit, and whether there are things that maybe I can't measure with scientific implements, but nonetheless, it exists. It certainly has to exist as a concept, otherwise all is lost. And if they ever had this concept of a soul, or humanity, as I was trying to get at earlier, the idea that they might once have maybe part of their soul allowed them to feel empathy, if they ever had that ability, it does seem to be gone now. Maybe it is possible to partially and then completely extinguish whatever that light is within the human being, so that their soul becomes so blackened that they don't have one anymore, if they ever had one. So yeah, very innovative. Exactly. And hey, Bianca, and lol, I take it he's saying lol there, minor celebrity, etc., etc. Right, and before I go back, I sometimes Bible quotes come to me. I'm not somebody who reads the Bible, although I keep meaning to. When I traveled around in South Africa and then some of the countries in Southern Africa, uh, namely, if I can remember them now, I kind of did it in sort of a few ways, like in a long road trip. So there was Namibia and then Zambia and then Botswana, and I had along the road you learn some things, and you've got a lot. Some like one of the times I went, I was driving on my own, hours and hours and hours, straight roads in Namibia, and I had plenty of time to talk, especially when all you have is a radio that doesn't tune in anything. That sort of way. You've got plenty of time to talk. Now, I did have my MP3 player with me, and I'd sometimes listen to things that I had already previously downloaded and things like that. But anyway, podcasts and whatnot. And sometimes just a word somebody says might get you thinking of something. It might put something in your subconscious. And then sometimes things come to the foreground of my mind. And then I say, where is that from? And I look it up. So this came to my mind and I looked it up. And it's from the Bible, from Ecclesiastes. And it says, for in much wisdom there is grief. And he who increases knowledge increases sorrow. I mean, that just seems so true to me. I mean, even if and I'm not going to say whether I believe in God or not, but let's supposing that if I didn't, let's supposing if I was an atheist, you couldn't read the Bible and not say that it doesn't contain wisdom. And not only does it contain wisdom, but it contains wisdom written in sometimes the most beautiful of language that really gets it across. Because as we know from recognizing how effective George Carlin was pointing out the trick of euphemisms to make very unpleasant, very sordid, very disgusting things sound tolerable and almost pleasant. Well, also, I mean, and particularly this works with the King James Version of the Bible. Now, other people might sort of say, oh, even that is not legitimate and whatever, and that's fine. But the sort of an archaic, anachronistic 1600s, I think it might have been, or maybe it was before that. Now, maybe I'm wrong there. Maybe it was 1500s. But anyway, whenever it was written, it's sort of a Shakespearean type thing. Maybe it's going back to the 1400s. That kind of language, even though it might not be immediately always understandable as to what exactly every word means, it makes a sound that is more pleasing to the ears, I think, and therefore more receptive in the mind than just sort of, whatever newer versions there are, newer English versions of the Bible. For in much wisdom is much grief, and he who increases knowledge increases sorrow. That's Ecclesiastes chapter 1, verse 18. A couple more comments before I just get back to the article here. Tim Pool recently discussed an article, says Lily Gazoo, about the percentage of people who say they don't have an inner voice, can't picture images in their minds at all. So alien to me. Yeah. I remember hearing that quite a while ago now. And first of all, I wasn't sure if we were understanding each other and defining our terms correctly. But no, I mean, but yeah, I think there might be an element of that. But yes, I think there's a lot of people who don't hear something in their own minds and they wouldn't be able to process verbiage or language if they didn't enunciate it, if they didn't verbalize it. Now, what inferences can be drawn from that? Maybe many, but one of them seems to be that perhaps these people aren't the same kind of person in many ways. And one of the shorthands might be that they're not exactly somebody with the same kind of a soul. It might be unkind to say they don't have one, but anyway, alien, or a different kind of a species. Alien, in other words, different enough that we don't recognize them anymore. I suppose that might be what a working definition of alien means. Erastus Turnipseed says, life may be like American football. Try to make it all the way to the field goal with the ball, your soul intact. Okay, touchdown. Yeah, maybe. Okay, back to the article here. They also seem to think of themselves as innovative for having thought of cutting out the, I'll say, larynx of the fetus first, so it won't be able to scream while they make further incisions into the poor helpless mite. Although that will conjure gruesome images in the mind of any human being who can empathetically feel the pain of another, there is no actual video shown on this fella's YouTube site. Now, I might as well say at this point that his YouTube site is called the Center for Medical Progress. The Center for Medical Progress. Now, that sounds like a euphemism in itself. I won't get into it any more than that because I've split my sentence in two, and I'll get onto it before too long. So, although that will conjure gruesome images in the mind of any human being who can empathetically feel the pain of another, there is no actual video shown of them performing their distressing procedure. Although there is a cartoon type of diagram, cartoon version of a womb and forceps. But there's no actual images of the procedure itself occurring, as far as I know. Now, something else that I will see if I can state here concretely and definitively. I don't know if this will be more shocking or equally shocking. Maybe it's more shocking, but maybe not. I might have, given the game away a little bit. We tend to think that women are the fairer sex, the gentler sex, the caring and nurturing sex. But what might be more shocking to many is that all of these people, these practitioners, have something in common. And you might have expected, as I say, that this should have made them all more naturally predisposed to being caring, nurturing, and empathetic to, and therefore more protective of, little babies. Well, what is the one thing they all have in common? They're all women. I mean, we'll have to, as a society, get our heads around that. Struggling not to say unpack, because that's such a leftist thing to say. Unfurl that little knotty problem and figure out how it got all tangled up in the first place. It's fetal trafficking under oath. This is more or less what you're looking at there on screen, the picture. Here. That's fetal trafficking under oath. And I won't say her name, just to try and stay within some limits here. But there she is anyway. Now, by the way, I've amended that image. She's not actually looking at that refuse bin in South Africa. Refuse is an interesting word because it's refuse, something we refuse to have, we throw it out. Refuse, litter, rubbish, garbage, trash. So she's not actually looking at that. I did place that there instead of what she's looking at. What she is actually looking at in the video, we'll get onto it soon, is some video of her boasting to who she thought was a potential client about the ways that she can dismember these fetuses or feti. No, it's not really feti. And by the way, fetus is just Latin for baby, the ways that she can do it that will suit him. Whatever the client wants, the client gets. She's very facilitating like that. So fetal trafficking under oath, planned hoods, planned human hoods, let's call it, admissions in 2019 about partial birth, wording. And these videos, as I say, you can find them on YouTube. The Center, that's spelled CENTER, for Medical Progress. So you can find that on YouTube, and also they have a website. It's centerformedicalprogress.org. These are the people who recorded these people in the same way as, say, James O'Keefe would, undercover. Now, a lot of people might say, oh, well, they're just doing their job. Like everybody during the great VidCon of 2020, the people who enforced all the things, the date mans. They're just doing their job, guy. Of course. Everyone has to just do their job. Everyone has to just do what they're told. Of course. Or they might lose their job. Oh, it's like a fate worse than death. Losing your job, your meaningless job in an evil corporation doing the digital equivalent of pushing pen on paper every day, completely pointlessly from one end of your desk to the other. It's just make work, busy work. That is the vast majority of most people's work. If somebody has a white collar job, that's all they do. I'm not trying to stoke a class war here. I was, for many, many years, a member of the white collar working class. Supposed white collar. These distinctions mean nothing anymore anyway. We're all just neo-feudalist serfs now anyway. But people are so terrified to lose these meaningless jobs that give them no fulfillment and make their lives, their entire lives, meaningless because their souls are bought and paid for by the corporations. And then the corporations only need to say, oh, well, we're following international best practice. And then they go, well, that's it. I have to do my job. I had no choice in the matter. I had no free will. I might have lost my job. You're trying to take food out of my children's mouths. I have to go to work and get rid of these unwanted problems. Otherwise, my problems might not get to feed. All these contradictions that they carry around in their minds. Yeah, and people might say, oh, it's not their responsibility to change the system, why don't you change the system if you're so clever, eh? Huh? Why don't you stand for election, right? And then why don't you become president or prime minister, huh? Then you could pass whatever laws you like, huh? This is the kind of nonsense attitude that you get from people. They want to basically make all these unpleasant type of realities go away. And it'd be my problem for bringing it up, because I'm unreasonable. I have unreasonable standards for civilization. Oh, my standards are too exacting. They're too high. John, don't you realize you live in an imperfect world? You're trying to apply your utopian ideals to an imperfect world. You have to just go along to get along. They have a word for that, by the way, in a certain religion. It's called kismet. To go along to get along. It's a form of lying. I consider it to be bearing false witness. And nobody should need a tablet with stuff etched on it to tell you what's right or wrong. Everyone knows it. They just pretend they don't. Right? Again, I'm pounding the pulpit here again, and I don't mean to. Right. And others will say, well, if they didn't do it, somebody else would instead. So I might as well get the money for doing it. You don't have to be one of these hand rubbers to sort of say, well, if there's any money going, I want to be snuffling at that trough of money. If I get away from that trough, somebody else will take my place. People always point the finger at, and I'm certainly not defending them. You know who I'm talking about. But people always point the finger at them. And nobody ever says, yeah, but look at most of our supposed own guys. They're like, pigs snuffling the truffles as well, aren't they? They love that filthy lucre just as much. Most of our own guys do. And you don't have to even take any of it away. You just have to sort of say, oh, you might not get that promotion. And they go, well, then tell me what to do and I'll do it. Whatever it is. Let's download the latest mandates. Head office says this, corporate says that. Well, we have no choice, lads. Corporate says we have to do it. Right, I started pounding the pulpit there again. Better just check the comments here for a little break, right? I have to cool myself down a little bit. I see some chat there. And maybe I won't put everything up on screen. I've been a little indelicate. I suppose I have to remind everybody. Let's calm down a little bit, Let's be a little bit more blunt. I know I was talking about very precise surgical instruments that are deliberately precise and sharp, but perhaps I need to blunten my vocal instruments a little bit. Oh, God. I see Jack's in the chat there. How are you, Jack? Erastus says, and I'm not sure if we've gone back far enough. I think so, yeah. The women I know tell the younger ones to get A words all the time. Yeah, they think they're giving them wisdom. Listen, young lassie, I've been through it. But look, there are many reasons for everything. A lot of them are, interwoven, overlapping. But one of the reasons, unfortunately, is, and there's lots of memes about this. Young women, think maybe that their older women are passing them down wisdom. They're not really. They're passing them down poison pills. Use that word as a metaphor, really, as well. And older women are jealous of younger women. They're being upstaged by younger women. It's very, very natural. And now that I'm not just getting older, but unfortunately have to realize that I am older now. I still have somewhere in my mind sort of saying, "Oh, I was only born yesterday," and in many ways I was. But someone who was 20 or 30 would laugh at that now, and somebody who was 15 would think I'm like a granddad now. I was born as a member of Generation X, and I go on about the boomers and how ancient they are, and how not with it and fuddy-duddy they are, and how selfish they are as a generation, broadly speaking. But by the way, I realize the same thing about Generation X now. And I actually think Generation X are worse. They're more cynical. They have less empathy. I think a lot of the boomer generation, did have some sense of shared responsibility. Like, I know we're all fighting amongst each other and vying for the top jobs or the best places to live or the nicest car and things like this, and the best pension plans and all this sort of stuff. But I think they did have also a sort of shared understanding. There was an unspoken agreement that, come on, lads, we better not destroy the world. At least we do have a responsibility to hand off some kind of a world to the next generation, even if we have mostly sucked it dry. We better leave some meat on the bones for Generation X. Now I don't know exactly what metaphor, if I can torture it down to sucking the marrow out of the bones for a generation, millennials and Y and Z and whatever. I don't know. I won't torture that metaphor too much. But I'll bring it back here now anyway, just to sort of say, yeah, older generations, I have realized, and it's a terrible admission. Most people there's no incentive to say this or to let younger generations people know this. Like, older generations get weak as they get older. They're physically less strong, and they know their minds are going to go as well. So they want to set themselves up nicely. And they see the younger generations coming up after themselves, even their own daughters and sons, as being competition. And they want to somehow trick them into thinking that they're lovely people and tell them sort of half truths so that they'll say, "Oh, my parents were lovely. They did the best for me. I'll look after them," or whatever it is. Even their own parents, but certainly people who aren't your parents but are members of older generation, see you as competition. Right? Now that's really setting the cat among the pigeons. And women are much better than men at mind games and manipulation and psychoanalysis and the ability to plant seeds in people's minds that they know will flower into flowers that have maybe a pretty exterior but have a poison sap. So young women should be very cautious. Should treat with great circumspection, I think is the word I might have been looking for earlier, the advice which older women give to them. Some of it's good, some of it's bad, and some of it might have a dual purpose, a sting in its tail. Jeez, we've gone off piste again here, but anyway. Right, is there any other comments that I should read now before I go back? Erasmus or Eratus says, no, it is Erastus, sorry. We're just doing our jobs, in quotation marks and then in brackets, removes, I'll say, sanguinous latex gloves. Now, Logan says, still going to stream tomorrow, Jack? And he says, yes, my only hope is a clear day. Right, now I wasn't sure if Jack was going to stream today or this evening. I'm trying not to spend too long, but I don't want to overlap on what he might have planned to do his time. Let me know, Jack, if you're doing a stream today or not, and then I might be able to go a bit long with this. Yeah, so Jack is talking about and Logan is talking about the eclipse tomorrow, which it looks like Jack has a very good welder's mask and a cell phone that's going to be able to record what's going on in the United States. What we're told is going to be a total eclipse that might last for 3 minutes and 22 seconds, or maybe more. Maybe it's 4 minutes and so. So Jack says, to read that, my only hope is a clear day. They say it may be cloudy. All right, and Erastus Turnipseed says, reminds me of the end scene in Brazil. And Erastus says, Shabbos minions. Exactly. Don't forget how many people we have in our supposed side, if there is a side, who were like the Judas story and like the Peter story as well. He said, "I've never heard of the guy. Not a friend of mine. I don't know him. I wasn't with him. I didn't do any of that." And the rest of them all made themselves scarce. There's Maze Mind. How you doing, Maze Mind? And better read this out. Erastus says, I respectfully disagree. The boomers gave F all about subsequent generations. Look at social security, government pensions, real estate market, etc. Yeah, I mean, they certainly did take the bulk of everything. I was just trying to, shore up the end of it with a bit of, to be fair, maybe they had some kind of vague collective understanding that they had to leave something, or at least they had to pass on a world in some way. But by and large, they are selfish. I'm trying to leave room for some exception, the way. Just trying to be fair and balanced, of course. I'll try not to keep doing that because I'm not even good at doing impressions of anybody. Mazemine says, first time notified about a stream in a long ass time. Yeah, well, look, I haven't done a stream in a long time, although I did one earlier today and I did one last weekend, but that's it. There hasn't been one in a long time before that. Lily says boomers should have participated more in local politics, school boards, town halls, resisted increasing regulations. Well, look, I'm very angry, and I won't get into it now, but I am very angry that I was left to be so naive for so long. But I have since discovered many people, a lot of times people in Canada who spoke up, I won't say all their names. I kind of almost said one of the names before, earlier on in the stream. But these are great guys. And they're old men now. If they're still alive, maybe some of them are on the brink of death, actually. But it's up to us. I mean, nobody's coming to save us, so it's up to us. Not encouraging anybody to do anything, but I will say, I would like my life to have meant something. That's what I'm going to say. And at the very least, I'm going to speak out, and I'm not going to speak out in any way that I'm going to be afraid of anything. I have no future. So my pension plan will be being incarcerated for the rest of my life. But I mean, I'd like not to be incarcerated for the rest of my life on some kind of nonsense charge of saying words that somebody didn't want me to say. I don't care whether it's in the constitution of any nation that I have a right to say whatever my mind thinks is truly true. And I've really thought about it, and I've taken great consideration of doing my best at that time to express it as accurately as I could. I'm not going to sort of stand on some constitution and say whether that allows me or doesn't allow me. I'm just going to say it. And if you're going to lock me up for that, well, whatever. We'll deal with that when it might happen. But look, I should be so lucky, is what I'm saying. I'm probably more destined to just die lonely in a ditch somewhere, I'm not trying to get out the smallest violins in the world. Anyway, we'll move on. Jack says he's going to stream at 7 Central. Okay, fair enough. A couple of hours, right? Well, that'll encourage me to be, a little more brief. And yeah, so Maze says, are you all on Odyssey? Yeah, I'm on Odyssey. I haven't done a proper stream there, but I might do at some point. And you seem to be able to. Odyssey, I think, seems to be the best of them, really, as far as functionality of the alternate ones. I don't know if Rumble has more people. I'm not convinced that it does, but anyway, I'm on Rumble as well, and I'm on Odyssey, and I'll try a bit better with those. Loken says Odyssey was bought off, and I do take the warning, all right, but I'll continue to use it, and I haven't noticed any difference. But of course, maybe we're not supposed to. But anyway, maybe they want us to speak our mind, but only over there. I seem to have been able to speak my mind freely on Rumble as well. I will say that. May's Mind says there, 100% agree. Speak your mind, brothers and sisters. Okay, great. I'll go a bit back now to this article. I'll read one more paragraph or two, and then we'll get on to some of the video to illustrate maybe in a 3D way of what's going on. So I'll start again a little bit this paragraph here. Others will say if they didn't do it, somebody else would instead. Indeed, I have found that very few people tend to feel any personal responsibility to leave a job they earn money from when they think of themselves as just a small cog in a big machine. And they usually find some way to justify taking no action that would cause them to suffer any inconvenience. You see, most people are hypocrites in that they talk morality, but it's never their responsibility to do anything, to take a principled stand. And well done to you if you have aligned your scruples with self sacrifice and chosen to live your life in accordance with your sense of morality. And you've no doubt noticed that while many people say they'd love to be able to do something to make a change, they invariably claim it's just not within their power. Yet, if we all decided that we weren't going to have anything to do with any of this, it couldn't happen. Now, what really got me viscerally was seeing the face of one of these, and I said mademoiselles, because she is up her own A. And I've written her name in the article there, but I won't say it. We'll just call her Dr. Debbie. And her surname sounds a bit Italian, but I mean, I've since come to realize that once what I thought were upper class elite Anglos were not Anglos. And I think the same might be said of Germans and Italians and Greeks as well. So all is not always what it seems or what it sounds like. Watching a video of herself, this is Dr. Debbie, eating lunch at a junket somewhere and talking in the most casual terms about the business aspects of A words. She discussed the monetary value of different body parts in a chillingly calm way as she chomped her salad and waved her fork around nonchalantly. Then, sipping from her travel cup while in the witness box, she adjusted her attire and adopted a casual demeanor, as though to convey an attitude of, what's all the fuss about? It's crystal clear to me she has a guilty conscience. And why I say this is because of the principle in law, mens rea, which means the flow of the mind or flow of thought. Because to really convict somebody of their guilt, they have to have been aware of their wrongdoing. And as much as she doesn't have a conscience, I think she's aware that what she's doing is wrong. I think she's aware that it causes pain and anguish to the least amongst us. Is there a Bible quote about that as well? That which you do to the least amongst us, you have done to me. Something like that. Yeah, but she's trying to brazen it out anyway. Why do I use the word brazen there? Because it means made of brass, and it should conjure up the brass bull. The brass bull that has horns and points up and down and has a door in its stomach that they used to in these they tell us Canaanite type of festivals or ceremonies. They would put their unwanted refuse in there, for their sacrifices to whatever god they worshipped. Better not say it. Lachmo. With one of the other practitioners, there may be an observable element of the psychological phenomenon noted in the Milgram experiment. If you're not familiar with that, definitely look it up. Milgram experiment going on when she says something along the lines of how she is maybe not totally comfortable with everything, but if someone sought clarification or guidance, then she might be able to feel completely confident or something similarly wishy washy. This indicates that she wants to give up her sense of personal responsibility for her own actions and believes that this will grant her immunity from culpability, which is a disturbingly common occurrence. Maybe I'll stop reading the article at this point and I will come back to it maybe later if there's time. And maybe I can do a follow up later. I will leave the link in the description of this video or stream. Right, so I'll just see if there's any quick comments and then if not, or well, if I read a couple that are there, then we'll get on to the videos then. Now, Lily says, remote land, off-grid, linked to other mini communities like the abbeys and the monasteries of old. Mazemind says, I'm out, just stopping by to show some support. Okay, cheers, Mazemind. Everyone keep fighting the good fight, he says. Jack says, YouTube seems to let me say anything this year. Setting me up? I don't know, Jack. It's interesting, all right. I don't know. Talk about it another time, I suppose. But yeah, I've noticed that. Yeah, good man. Anyway, right now I'll get into videos, and you'll see this woman here, Debbie, featured before too long. But this video is at most 20 minutes, and I think we can get through the entire thing. I'll play it in segments, and I won't comment except before and after. Now, this is the beginning of the video where it shows a sort of a diagram, a moving diagram, cartoon, if you like, video, a drawn video of forceps and a side profile. How do you say? Like in engineering where you cut the engine in half and you can see its internals. Same kind of an idea. Look, I mean, I didn't mean that to come out graphically sounding, but that's really makes it sound graphic to me again. Here we go with the video anyway. It sort of illustrates what's going on here.
To harvest usable body parts from aborted fetuses, there are two practical problems that need to be overcome. Number one, the abortion needs to be done in a way that the desired organs are still recoverable. And number two, the fetus needs to be alive at the time of the abortion so that the cells and tissues in the organs remain viable for experimental use. This makes partial birth abortions, where the fetus is delivered alive and in one or mostly one piece, particularly helpful for organ harvesting. But partial birth abortions are a federal crime. It is a felony to do an abortion where the fetus is delivered alive beyond certain anatomical points on the fetus, only in order to kill the fetus afterward. Yet CMP's undercover video and now forensic deposition evidence points to routine violations of this law in Planned Parenthood's abortion practice.
Right, well, I don't know if you noticed a commonality there. All 6 people at the end there putting their hands up. In other words, I swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, I assume is what they were saying. All women. It's that should be one of the things, I hope, is what shocks other people watching and listening, as it did me, because naively, I would have assumed at some point in my life that, wait a minute, women should be the ones who would be least likely to be participating in any of this. Surely they're the nurturing kind, no? Well, we're going to have to figure out that apparent contradiction. Right, I'll move on. And you've seen what that was. That really sets it up for what's going on here. I believe this woman is, well, her name is on screen. I won't say it out loud.
Here's what Planned Parenthood Gulf Coast Vice President of Abortion Access, Tram Nguyen, testified under oath about her prior admissions about this topic.
Okay, this is frame 42677.
Yeah, and the quality, so again, I don't want to be crass, but the specimen quality in terms of how intact things are coming out.
There are times where it's a little too intact.
A little too intact?
Yeah, it's like, okay.
I stopped it at 43098. The question in the clip related to, from David DeLayden, related to specimen quality, and then you responded and said there are times where it's a little too intact. What did you mean when you said a little too intact?
That all of the limbs were completely attached to the torso versus the limbs being held on by a piece of tissue, piece of bone.
So when you are referring to all the limbs being attached to the torso, are you talking about a complete fetus?
Objection, vague. It could be a fetus that has all of the limbs attached to it and the calvarium attached to it.
In the situation that you described, was the calvarium also attached?
Objection, vague. I don't remember.
Do you remember seeing any specimens where the calvarium was also attached?
Objection, vague. I've seen the calvarium attached to the torso, but no limbs attached, or part of the torso was missing.
Okay. Your affiliate does not use digoxin, correct?
Correct.
And that's been the case since you've been there?
Correct.
So, look, there's a few things there. I didn't set up in such a way that I could pause it ongoing. But, I don't know if anybody watches the body language channels. There's 4 guys who do a body language channel, body language panel, maybe they're called. And there's also a woman who does body language. It would be, she's called Bombard's Body Language, and the Body Language Ghost are her 2 names. I'd be very interested if any of them would ever dare touch this subject. To me, there's many things about her body language. There's something about her jaw, and it's not specific to her ethnicity, I don't think, but I think it might be. There might be, maybe I'm wrong, I'll take that back. I can't remember what country it is in Asia. I won't take a stab at it. That might have a preponderance or a certain subset of its population, or maybe a plurality of its population, have a jaw that operates a little bit like that. It's sort of a, well, I won't get to describe it. You've seen what it is like, maybe a guppy type of jaw. And it might, unfortunately, make her look like that she's biting on her jaw a bit more than ordinarily, in such a way as might make her look as if she's being more obstinate than she already is. But I do think that she is sort of, I see her occasionally trying to feign, especially when she fluttered her eyes there, blinked her eyes a bit, trying to feign as though she's just a dainty little girl. They always default to this. Every woman defaults, but I'm just a dainty little girl. I couldn't have done anything bad. So there's an element of that, and also simultaneously an element of obstinance, stubborn obstinance. I didn't do it. How dare you? And also of trying to project an air of, bravery. Is kind of not quite the right word, but defiance, I suppose. Maybe that's the word I'm looking for. Now, there is another aspect, which it's going to be more difficult to tap dance around this, because people might say, "Oh, she's American. She's an American." Well, yeah, okay, if you want to say so. But there are other factors here going on, And let's see if I can say this. Would it be easier for a horse to perform this kind of procedure on the fetus of a zebra? I wonder. They're kind of more or less the same animal, but there are distinct differences. Would a horse feel more squeamish doing it to another horse's fetus, gestating foal, than she would feel like she's doing it to? Would she feel would she feel more gruesome or squeamish about doing it to basically another horse's gestating foal than she would to a zebra's gestating foal? You get the comparison I'm making here. And I think, as unpolitically correct as that is something that has to be considered. And we might revisit Debbie there and then sort of say, is she also a horse? Of course. Because maybe she's not. There could be an element of that going on there. And certainly, if, say, a European, or what was once understood to be an American, was working in, let's say, Thailand or Cambodia or Vietnam, doing, these procedures to the calvariums and, that sort of stuff, like, of whether it be Vietnamese or Cambodians or whoever's, over there in Asia. Would the Asians have no difficulties about asking these very pertinent questions? Like, what's she doing to our young? You know what I mean? The other thing then, of course, is, the calvarium. We talked earlier about, George Carlin and his euphemisms. Is the calvarium attached to the thorax? It just sounds like some kind of distant medical procedure. Oh, those clever boffins, whatever they're doing with calvariums. It's a baby's head they're talking about. A baby's head. Like, why do you think in medical procedures they have all these fancy Latin names for things? It's to put psychological distance between, well, often like in actual, consenting procedures where the patient knows what's going on. It's to also give them some room psychologically to be able to tamp down their own panic. But the baby in the womb, like, all he knows is that he never got to see anything. He just saw distant lights. He just saw vague, unfocused lights that he could, and shapes that he could make out through his own eyelids and through the thinner and thinner skin of his mother's womb and stomach skin, abdomen skin, as he grew bigger or she grew bigger in the womb. Saw shapes, heard noises, and then this thing comes at you. Getting rid of your larynx so you don't scream, and then maybe detaching your calvarium after you come down the birth canal, but maybe before. It all depends what the procedure says, or how rigorously they stick to the procedure. Right, I'll stop there. I think I got a lot out there, and it is heavy stuff. I understand that, and I did give you fair warning. If you just joined and you didn't hear the warning, sorry, but you need to know. Yeah, Erastus says, see Lilith. Yeah, absolutely. It's a very interesting story that there was a sort of, Eve precursor. I was going to say, like, Eve beta or Eve alpha, and then Eve came along afterwards. But yeah, the story of Lilith and how she would not submit to Adam and then went off with either Satan or Hasatan or whatever, and that's part of, as I understand it, a religion that we're only becoming familiar with now, a very ancient religion. Yeah, so I'll just put that screen there. Yeah, look, no, I'll say it. These people are disgusting, what they do. There's no point in trying to be genteel about it now, Erastus says, hell man, there's vids of the bug people eating them. Yeah, now that you come to think of it, there was a time when I was seeing a lot of these videos coming from, I don't know where exactly, and they were, do you know what it was? It was probably Live Leak. That's probably what it was. A lot of videos that made me say, if this is global humanity or world humanity, then we're lost. Or even if it's just them, I know there might be something unique about their genetics or epigenetics that causes this behavior, but when there are enough bodies in whatever territory, the price of life gets very, very cheap. And I witnessed that myself in Africa. I'm not saying that they were all savages, actually far from it. Because I have to say, like, that the way, European man, supposed civilized man treats himself, treats his own civilization, his own brothers and sisters, metaphorically speaking. But, there will be some relationship there genetically somehow. It's with great callousness. It's with minimal humanity. So, like, we can sort of look at communist China, either as it was in the 1950s and 60s, Cambodia, whatever that was exactly, Kampuchea, or as it is now in the great melding of, corporate industrialization, which dehumanizes people, in addition to the communism that China had for a long, long time, or still does, I mean to say. When there's a surplus, an abundance and a surplus of life, when there's, 1.2, 1.3, 1.4, 1.5 billion people, like, even the smallest industrial part becomes more valuable than the average human life. Now, I'm only saying that to play devil's advocate, because I can't say the other aspect really of what I want to say, like, which is, absolutely, having seen a fair amount of stuff in Africa and heard a lot of stuff, which maybe someday I might tell you about if it's possible. Probably not here. Which I was told and didn't actually witness myself, but sounds credible. But I'll pass it on for what it's worth, and some documentation. I realized like that one of the naiveties I had was that I thought that I lived in a not just society, but I thought that I lived in a civilization, and all of that is paper thin. It's all a veneer. It's all a facade, really. An edifice, and behind it is something very, very ugly. And all I'm saying is that European man should not think that he is immune from treating his fellow European human being as callously as it seems to be the case that Chinese people on LiveLeak are capable of treating their fellow Chinese human beings. The larynx thing is a sublime evil indeed. And now they're building factories so we can eat the bugs. It's no laughing matter though, because apparently it's already ground up and put into lots of flour and made cakes with and all biscuits and all this sort of stuff to bulk it up. I'll leave it there except to say I wonder what these people think about the Hippocratic Oath. And does the phrase, first do no harm, ever seem to be at odds with what they do? I know the Hippocratic Oath was changed and all that. Right, I'll leave it there though. And I'll get on to a bit more of the videos here. As soon as it popped up here, Loken says, it reminds me of a video I saw of a supermodel rushing around outside of a fancy hotel during a special event screaming, "They're eating people in there! They're eating people in there!" Yeah, I can believe that, all right. Look, I'll just say this, even though it's off topic, but look, whatever. I worked in Johannesburg, as I mentioned earlier on at the beginning of this, near to the beginning of this. And that's Joburg. Nobody ever says Johannesburg. Joburg in South Africa. But like I was a pampered veal cow, right? If we're all cattle, I was a pampered veal cow. This is not a boast, right? It's just to set up what are degrees of echelons of living and what you think are civilized societies or whatever, I was a temporary worker there. The corporation that I worked for sent me over there to do some important work for the corporation in setting up a new branch of their tentacle over there, that sort of way. And so to be fair, they looked after me well, expenses account and your hotel and whatever is paid for, whatever you need, your food, you're renting your car and all that sort of stuff. And it was at this time, I had already stopped smoking, I think, Maybe I'd stopped smoking for about a year. I can't exactly remember. It was long enough where it was sort of permanent, But there was occasions, especially like, if I'd have a drink and then, I'd like a cigarette and that kind of thing. Now, I used to work with some other guys there. I won't get into it. I won't make it too long, but I think this time I was on my own. And so no real company. So I think I had some sort of news that had, was the kind of news. Like if you ever remember seeing Danny DeVito in The War of the Roses, and he has an emergency cigarette in a glass case. He's a lawyer, a divorce lawyer or something like that. And he has a glass case just sort of in his bookshelf somewhere. It says, "Emergency, break glass in case of emergency," for that cigarette, And I think I did go out for a cigarette and I went downstairs. I was staying in this lovely fancy schmancy hotel, And I went downstairs, and it's kind of hotel that has doormen, And I know enough to stand, not to sort of make the hotel look bad and all this. I stood away enough from the hotel so the smoke doesn't blow into where the people might be entering. But there was already maybe somebody having a smoke there, and I sort of stood to the side there where they were having a smoke, and we got into a chat, and somebody came down as well. Somebody came out of the bar for a cigarette. And before long, there was about maybe 4 or 5 of us having a good chat there, or a good chinwag. And then this very elegant looking, what can I say? He was either black or coloured, Coloured has a specific meaning, by the way, in South Africa. It's sort of a different type of tribe in South Africa. But anyway, she was very good looking, very well dressed, and like she wouldn't have been in this hotel unless she was either rich or had a very rich boyfriend or husband. So she was standing there, but she didn't want to join us. Now I was wearing jeans and Reeboks or Nikes or something, and a Converse, something like that. That they were tatty Converse. So I was letting the hotel down in that sense. And out comes this fella. Sorry, out comes this woman anyway. But it was very clear she was turning her nose up at the rest of us. Along comes her boyfriend in a Bentley SUV, and he's flanked by two Audi Q7s. I was trying to say it in German there. And like he has his bodyguards in the front and in the back Audi Q7, and so he pulls up, but he's in the Bentley, and she's been made wait there for 5 minutes. It was very embarrassing that she was made wait there, with the likes of the scum of the earth like us. Amazing, isn't it? Hopefully that's giving you insight into the way Africa works now. That this black lady dressed in her finery was looking down on me, a European white boy. Maybe I've said too much. I've gone off the piste a little bit too much anyway, But she started giving out to him, and I suppose I'm just taking the opportunity because I'll never think to say it again. She started sort of, hadn't even closed the door, and she was giving out to him. I think maybe he might have even gone around and opened the door for him. That's what it was. He pulled up and waited for her to get in, but she wouldn't until he got out and opened the door for her. She started giving him an earful. And then when they all drove off, like, he must have been mortified, and like obviously very rich to be able to afford two Audi Q7s for his entourage and his own Bentley SUV. But it just goes to show, like, it doesn't matter how rich you are or what color you are. These women, like, the more you give them, the less grateful they'll be, and the more they'll make your life a misery. I guess that's the point of the story. Has nothing really to do with what you said there. Sorry about that. But I believe it as well. I won't get into it, but there was a few other things there. I went to that hotel bar many times, and sometimes people who were dressed in their finery, once I got to know them, I realized, or it became very, very clear, that they weren't nice people at all. And they were behind all the finery. They were engaging in quite sordid things. Anyway, back to the A wording. It's good to see Miss Maskless there. Thanks for covering this, she says. I'm too far behind in the comments, and I'm not sure what's regarding what. I see that crazy ass vid. She wasn't telling the truth. She's a fine actress. Okay, well, it sounds very much like the he's not real woman on the plane. That Emma Raffer is not real. So if this is a recent thing, I definitely haven't seen it, but it doesn't sound familiar to me. I'd be interested in seeing that. Erasta says, nothing like a rare smoke when you don't regularly smoke. A lifeboat and NowThis. I know. I haven't had one in many years now again, I think. But look, I never rule it out, because that way it's like I'm studiously avoiding it, and then it has almost as much power over me, probably the same as power over me as it did when I was smoking every day. Cheers, Turnip. Okay, well, glad. Maybe it was a sort of intermission until we get back to a bit more of these videos. And there, Jack says, nothing like a double S word acting haughtily. Okay, I think we will be able to just get back into a bit more videos here, right? Of the A wording. Yeah, it doesn't seem like a good segue, but look, whatever. So this is another one I think we're going to hear from, right? About this wonderful procedure that they offer to women and men who might be pregnant as well. I forgot there might be men who's pregnant as well. Shouldn't have assumed that there wouldn't be any of those availing of the same services.
Why would an abortion provider worry about a fetus being too intact after pulling it out of the patient? The only logical answer is because they know the fetus didn't die until after it was outside the mother. They know abortions like this risk criminal liability under the partial birth abortion law. That's why Planned Parenthood has their abortion providers place so-called intent statements in their medical records to feign compliance with the federal law. The PPFA medical standards and guidelines tell the abortion provider to just mark in the patient medical record that the doctor intended to use dismemberment on the fetus. Planned Parenthood abortion providers describe this intent statement as just a routine checkbox.
So every time you do a procedure, that's how you document. So like there's like a checkbox that says, I intend to, so before the procedure, you do your evaluation, you write, I intend to utilize dismemberment techniques for this procedure.
Dr. Deborah Nicotola, who is in charge of developing the medical standards and guidelines, first described it this way.
Federal abortion ban is a law, and laws are up to interpretation. So there are some people who interpret it as its intent. So if I say on day one I do not intend to do this, what ultimately happens doesn't matter because I didn't intend to do this on day one, so I'm complying with the law.
And what did you mean when you said that?
I was explaining how some lawyers interpret the law.
And what's your understanding of that interpretation?
I'm not a lawyer, but I have been told that some lawyers feel comfortable just documenting what your intent was at the beginning of an abortion.
And there she is. Her name was on screen. I'll just do her the favor of not saying it just now because I have a feeling that that is something they don't want. I think that might be currently being part of this fellow, as I say, his YouTube channel is called the Center for Medical Progress, and his website is centerformedicalprogress.org. But look, I mean, you could see what a proper little madam she is, you know. You can see her thinking she's being clever. You can see her being belligerent, not just obstinate, but belligerent. She's gritting her teeth a little bit, you know, clenching her teeth. And through the clenched teeth, she's saying, they are documenting what they intend to do. Some people feel more comfortable documenting what they intend to do. And she knows, knowing full well that what one documents one intends to do and what one accidentally ends up doing in the theater of operations may be two very different things, you know. And she's aggressive as well, you know. She's almost spitting saliva through her clenched teeth. You know, how dare you question me? And I imagine in her mind she's probably saying something along the lines of which has been probably put in that very famous play, I guess I'll say it, by William Shakespeare, The Merchant of Venice, where, you know, Shylock is more or less sort of saying like, oh, you know, how dare you question me? And very much like, in fact, we're going to have to cast our minds back to 2020 when a certain Dr. F word says, if you put me on trial, you're putting science on trial. I am science. Same kind of an attitude I see there in her face. I mean, it could be wrong, could be wrong. I don't have any degrees in body language or facial expression or statement analysis or tone of voice analysis. But I've been along long enough now to know a balshy, hostile witness when I see one, and an unrepentant witness. Yeah, that's our word salad, all right. We'll get into another video. We'll get through them, okay? There's a bit more now of what she feels comfortable with, you know.
And here's how Planned Parenthood Gulf Coast understood that.
Like Dr. Beasley said, we can never intend to complete the procedure intact.
You can't intend to.
You can't intend to, but if it happens.
You just have an intent statement, right?
I know I said I wasn't going to pause. That's 10 seconds in. We'll go back and we'll do it again. But did you hear that? You know, they're laughing. They think it's very funny. All right, I'll play it again.
And here's how Planned Parenthood Gulf Coast understood that.
Like Dr. Beasley said, we can never intend to complete the procedure intact.
You can't intend to.
You can't intend to, but if it happens.
You just have an intent statement, right?
That's correct. There's an intent statement that you have to document.
Right. Who would have thought? You can rob a bank so long as you carry a form with a checkbox documenting that you have no intentions of bank robbing. The Federal Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals was not impressed with Planned Parenthood's legal reasoning.
I believe that what was actually said on the tape is that in order to ensure that they comply with legal restrictions that are not at issue in this case, with ensuring that there's not intact delivery of a living fetus, that there are certain ways to document that process to ensure that the law is complied with.
Well,
There's
it's not a matter of
accusation here.
documenting it, it's complying with the actuality of it. And you can't contradict what you're not trying to, but you can't contradict what Dr. Tron said because she didn't appear on the stand in the district court.
You said that you can never intend to complete the procedure intact, but it does happen, is what you said on the video, right?
Objection mischaracterizes the video. Yes.
So there are intact procedures that occur, and your understanding is that it's okay as long as the doctor signs that that wasn't the doctor's intent.
Objection.
True?
Objection vague mischaracterizes the video, mischaracterizes the testimony. No. It is true. Compound. Sorry.
I mean, she searched her mind for any escape route, didn't find one, and then just kind of gave up, went, yeah, it's true. They know what they're doing. And you saw her earlier on in that clip, laughing it up, yucking it up. Big, toothy, genuine smile. They don't just think they're funny, they think they're very clever. Maybe these people are the definition of midwits. Maybe they're, above 100, clever enough to be able to faithfully follow procedures, but never to listen to that little voice inside them that says, are you sure that you should just do anything you're told to do just because you're getting paid for it? Is this really a job that when I do it, I feel proud about it and I'd like other people to know what I do? Do I feel like when I walk around some salubrious Los Angeles or San Francisco boardwalk and I pop into a cafe, do I sort of ask for a mocha latte frappuccino with crushed ice and sit in the little chair there and cross my legs and read whatever progressive nonsense I like to read or watch whatever I like to watch? Do I imagine that I'm contributing something to the society or bettering civilization in some way? I better move on. I'll play another clip here now.
While she was Planned Parenthood National's Senior Director of Medical Services, Dr. Nicotola told Congress that neither she nor any Planned Parenthood doctor would ever perform a partial birth abortion intentionally. But here's what she finally admitted to when CMP put her under oath.
How much of a difference can that actually make if you know what's expected or what we need versus?
It makes a huge difference. I'd say a lot of people want liver, and for that reason, most providers will do this case under ultrasound guidance, so they'll know where they're putting their forceps. Kind of rate-limiting step of the procedure is calvarium. Calvarium, the head is basically the biggest part. Most of the other stuff can come out intact.
Right.
It's very rare to have a patient that doesn't have enough dilation to evacuate all the other
to bring the body cavity out intact and all that.
So then you're just kind of cognizant of where you put your graspers. You try to intentionally go above and below the thorax so that, we've been very good at getting hard, long liver, because we know that, so I'm not going to crush that part. I'm going to basically crush below, I'm going to crush above, and I'm going to see if I can get it intact. And with the calvarium...
What do you mean when you said that?
I mean, you can go above and below the thorax.
In order to get intact fetal tissue?
If that's the desire, yes.
Okay, and do you do that?
I haven't done that since I participated in tissue donation.
Okay, but when you did, you would do that as a general matter?
If I was aware that it was a donation case, yes.
But you don't consider that a change in the procedure?
Objection asked and answered.
It's not a change in the procedure.
I crush above, I crush below. It's all in a day's work. I think, it's hard to pick a favorite, for my most scurrilous practitioner. And of course, we should remember that these people, while everybody in the whole world must hold some personal responsibility for what they do, there might be some mitigating factors. It's not for me to tell you exactly. I mean, I should hold back a little bit and say, like, I'm not saying these people are condemned and et cetera, whether in a court of law or if there's an afterlife, in all of that. But I suppose what I have to say is, if I had to pick a favorite with regard to facial expressions, this one gives the most, I think, plain, visible, duping delight of all of them. Now, again, I don't have any degrees or diplomas or certificates in any of this body language, facial expression reading, statement analysis. But I mean, she could barely contain the smiles. She was trying to extinguish all the smiles that were lighting up her face, and she thought she was so clever. Like, do you do that? When did you do that? Oh, I haven't done that since I was doing that thing when I was asked to do it. And would you do it? Well, I mean, if that's what the request was, to do that thing. These torturous word games, they're not even clever games, She's trying to introduce word salad, but finding very little room for it. Trying to find some semantic room to hide amongst, torturous definitions and weasel words. But it's very plain there. And she's proud of it. And she smiles. And I think what she's smiling about is her fond memories of how she derived pleasure from exacting or enacting pain on the innocent and the helpless and the defenseless. I think she's smiling at the memories she has, very much like a serial killer might keep trophies to remind them of their glory days, of their crescendos of their careers, the climax of their pleasures. I think that's why she's smiling. I think she's being forced under oath to recall the truth of what it is she did, and I think that she is smiling fondly from the memories that her mind is conjuring back into the center of her mind. So she's my favorite from that reason, because she's the easiest to read. Oh, we've done very well at obtaining the intact calvariums and thoraxes and livers and whatever you're buying today, whether it be kidneys, as she chomps down. These people have no problem eating. The way sometimes people might say, now listen, if you're eating, maybe best don't eat while you're listening to this. Because this might make you lose your appetite. She's so blasé about the whole thing, so unconcerned as she shovels whatever food she has on her fork into her mouth. Yum, yum. Yeah, oh yeah, we can do that. Oh yeah, we've been very successful. Later on, she's asked, when we say we, what kind of we do you mean? Are you included in that we? Or are you talking about the corporation as a royal we or something? And the answer is yes, but I'll say that in case I don't get time to actually show you. But I think there's one more here of her.
Okay, I'm going to keep playing the video.
In general, some people will actually try to change the presentation so that it's not vertex. So when it's a vertex presentation, you never have enough dilation of the gradient because unless you have a real huge amount of dilation to deliver an intact calvarium. So if you do it starting from the breech presentation, there's dilation that happens as the case goes on, and often the last you can evacuate an intact calvarium. So I mean, there are certainly steps that can be taken.
So they can convert to breech, for example, at the start of the...
Exactly. Under ultrasound guidance, they can just change the presentation.
Okay.
And we've been pretty successful with that.
Yeah.
I'd say.
Has there ever been a case where you have to change the presentation in order to get intact fetal tissue?
No.
Okay. And when you said we've been pretty successful with that, you're talking about we as in including you, correct?
Vague. You're talking about back to the clip that we just watched?
Do you know what I'm talking about?
I believe you're asking the sentence that I just said in the clip.
Yeah, where you said we've been pretty successful at that.
Yes, I was referring to PPLA.
Including you?
Yes, including me. I worked at PPLA.
Okay.
Planned Parenthood.
Yeah, the other thing there, first, I suppose I'll say, is that she is pursing her lips. She's drawing back in her mouth, but she's trying to affect an air of that. She's merely trying to be brief. She's trying to save the questioner time, because these are such sort of basic questions, that they're pretty much beneath her. That's the air she's trying to affect, that she's dealing with an idiot here who's asking such remedial questions, and she's just trying to humor him. And that these are such trivial questions for her, that she almost doesn't know how to climb so far down in intellect as to deign to answer them for him. Essentially condescending and affecting this air of detachment as well. Curt and brief and to the point, because she's just trying to spare the court's time, because she's good like that. She's decent. She's a lovely person. And she could have been a midwife, All the terms, all the knowledge just goes to show you, like, any weapon can be used for good or for bad, and any knowledge can be used for good or for bad. She could have been helping deliver babies. She could have, talking about their turning a baby if the feet are presenting, that would be considered a breach. When you want to deliver a live birth, a healthy baby, you want to make sure it's head first, so that that they are able to breathe, and that the umbilical cord doesn't get wrapped around their neck, so there's no chance of choking then. You want to do everything to help, but she's using all her knowledge to do everything to hinder. But insofar as maybe they would like to have as fresh as possible the parts, maybe she'd like to keep it alive then on the outside, even though they say not to do that according to their procedures. But S words happen, as they say, in the heat of the operating theatre. The other thing then is, of course, is that she's, what I forgot to mention was, again, I have no expertise as such. I just have my own lived experience, and from watching a lot of these body language programs, and it's so obvious in her body language here. Her teeth are getting dry. Her mouth is getting dry. And her gums are sticking to her lips. Her teeth are sticking to her lips, and she's drinking from her, maybe it's water, maybe it's something else, in her sippy cup, to try and keep her lips a little bit wet, so that it doesn't sound like she is nervous when she speaks. She wants to give the air of being unconcerned and slightly bemused at why she's being called to court for, to answer these kind of irrelevant questions. I don't know why anybody would be interested in this. We did nothing wrong. She wants to affect this air of unconcernedness, of aloofness, but her body language betrays her. She knows what she did was wrong, and she knows she's under pressure, and that's why her mouth is getting dry. So it shows that we have some things in common with these people, regardless of if they've lost their humanity as we might know it. There's Wind War. Good to see you, Wind War. Hello, fellow brother in arms. Thanks for that. All right. We're nearly through this. I'll see how we're going. Might have time for another video or bit of video. I think we might. We're nearly there. Time for another actress or practitioneress. I don't know if these are nurses or doctoresses. But anyway, here's an elder woman. Not sure if this is the same one who gave the speech that I described earlier. We'll leave that for another time. But anyway, here she is, a slightly older lady.
Parenthood's checkbox partial birth abortions are bad enough, but there is an even broader foundational problem of medical ethics here, with all kinds of ramifications in state and federal law. Planned Parenthood promised its patients, and the patients trusted Planned Parenthood, to make decisions on the patient's care based on the best medical interest of the patient. Instead, secretly, Planned Parenthood changed the way they treated their patients in order to get marketable body parts.
And then at the PPLA time, so we'll go to PPLA time, with that fetal tissue procurement, would the surgeon in any way change the abortion procedure for those patients who had consented to donate fetal tissue?
Objection, vague, calls for speculation. You can answer.
Not the procedure.
Okay. And when you say not the procedure, would the surgeon change anything besides the procedure for those patients who had agreed to provide fetal tissue?
Not the procedure, which is the abortion, not the method, which is aspiration abortion. The techniques, sometimes there was a just lively discussion about whether it was permitted or not permitted to change the technique. And we were still debating that in Los Angeles when I left, but by the time I met Mr. DeLayden and his associates, I had evolved in my thinking to think that changing the technique to get better tissue was allowed.
Okay. So, and I want to make sure we unpack that so we're all clear. So when you say the procedure, because you said three things: procedure, method, technique.
Right.
Would you describe for us what is your understanding of the meaning of the word procedure?
An abortion.
Right, body language out of the way first. She's constantly self-soothing with the hands, right? So she has her fingers clasped and her thumbs free, and she's constantly winding her thumbs around each other. It's called self-soothing. Again, not an expert on this, but it's just her body language is so obvious there. So she's nervous, and she's got her script prepared. You know, she was able to rattle off the three things there that had not changed. But of course, they're playing the semantics game. By the way, I would call her, I was wrong. She is a doctress. Doctoress Gatter. That one might be a bit more clear. I was wrong to say, as I say, that she might not be a doctor. No, she definitely is a doctoress. But she's a severe looking woman. I wouldn't even call her handsome. And she has, this air of gravitas by pulling her chin in towards her. But, as I've listened well, and she teaches as well, like this bombards body language, the body language ghost. It's to protect her own neck, literally and figuratively. She knows her neck is figuratively on the chopping block. So she's protecting her vital organs in a way, but she's trying to make it out as though, no, she's just gravely concerned that there might be any untoward things going on. And she's here to reassure everybody that, oh no, in any of the three measurable ways, the procedure that they offer is not changed in any way just because the person coming in for the procedure to be performed upon them is to reassure them it won't be changed just because they tick the box to say, you may use whatever you take out of me for medical research or for commercial purposes or whatever. Because a lot of the times they'd say to people like, listen, we'll do this for free. And especially we'll do it for free if you tick the box there to say we may, dispose or use the parts as, and maybe they probably have some flowery language, as and may be conducive towards the better understanding of medical practices and blah, blah, blah. And the patient, that's not what's first and foremost in their minds. They'll go, oh yeah, no problem. So a lot of people, maybe the majority of people, they're kept psychologically removed from the actuality of what's happening and what is going to happen to them and what they remove from them. For them to be able to sort of say to themselves, yeah, I don't have to worry about that. Just worry about getting in and getting out. Quick, effective and painless. And clean up afterwards, and then I never have to worry about it again. But unfortunately, the psychology of it is that the subconscious knows exactly what's going on. And unless addressed, it never recovers, and it actually always gets worse, and the psychosis grows. And unfortunately, this is why so many women who have done this, what they thought was just going to be a quick, easy, painless, safe, legal, and effective procedure when they were young, could be in their teens, maybe in their 20s, maybe even in their 30s or 40s. And that later on, I won't exactly call it guilt, but It's something that's knocking constantly on their conscious mind, and it won't shut up. And you know the way people take out things that are secretly bothering them on those around them, whether it be their husband, their living children, their relatives, their workers, their whoever. Just somebody who happens to be a worker in some front of desk place, the woman will explode at them. It's not about whatever that thing is currently at that moment. It's about that sense of whatever tangled ball of emotions are in the back of her subconscious mind. Okay, we're nearly there as far as the end of this video goes.
If our usual technique is suction at 10 to 12 weeks, and we switch to using an iPass or something with less suction in order to increase the odds that will come out as an intact specimen, then we're kind of violating the protocol that says to the patient, we're not doing anything different in our care of you. And to me, that's a kind of a specious little argument, and I wouldn't object to asking Ian, who's our surgeon that does the cases, to use an iPass at that gestational age in order to increase the odds that he was going to get an intact specimen. But I do need to throw it out there as a concern, because the patient is signing something and we're signing something saying we're not changing anything in the way we're managing you just because we agreed to give tissue.
Right. Did you see the sort of the shrug of the head there, holding the hands together, and then the thumbs being splayed outwards, right? It's the same as shrugging the shoulders outwards, as if to sort of say, like, I've done all I can do. It's not my problem. It's somebody else's problem. It's a physical movement, almost as if to literally indicate, I divest myself of responsibility for this action. It's very similar as well to a stream I did last week mentioning this fella Caiaphas when he, what does he say? He rents his clothes from him to divest himself of the responsibility for this legal and religious burden of saying that Jesus must die for the nation, or that a Messiah must die for the nation, or whatever way they put it. In a similar way that Pontius Pilate washed his hands of it as well. She's sort of washing her hands of the personal responsibility, and also sort of saying, I'm the elder hen here, but don't any of you younger upstarts think that you can ever point to me and say that, I was the one who should bear responsibility for, I think, I'm going to guess IPAS might stand for inductive pressure or internal pressure or something like that. That if anybody ever comes knocking and says, we are somebody with authority now to prosecute you for your maliciousness or malfeasance or malignance in the way that you operated here, in the way that you knew what you were doing, you had mens rea, according to your own laws, you had the guilty conscience, you admitted it, and of course might even get her on perjury as well, because what she said definitively under oath there in the court was different to what she admitted there amongst her colleagues or whoever she was talking to there, when she didn't understand that she was being recorded necessarily. She said, well, even though we say we don't change the way we do the procedure in any material way, because we still use a suction, if we want to get an intact version of the fetus out for whatever reasons, or commercially or whatever, or for it to get the biological parts so we can put it onto medical research, I wouldn't be averse, I suppose, if you twisted my arm to alter the pressure that we use on this medical implement. And she's saying that's not changing the procedure. We're just changing the variables of the things that we do in the procedure. So it's really splitting hairs there. I think you understand it, but bears repeating. We're just, says Erastus, we're just wantonly destroying God's most precious creation, as our job requires. It's, again, according to whatever little law or procedure or policy they've managed to draw up. And they think that, if there is a God, that trumps God's law. And this is the problem, of course, of everybody becoming atheists, because it was the thing to do at the time. It was the style at the time. Nobody really believed in anything. At first, they didn't believe in God, and then they didn't believe in not being a God. Nobody really, in the vast majority of human beings, really has any concrete beliefs about anything. But the problem in getting rid of the pretense that most people believe in God is that nobody can point to anything and say, oh yeah, well, there's a higher law than your corporate policy or your statute that your government implemented or whatever, or your Supreme Court ruled on. There's a higher law than that. You can't do that anymore when your nation kills God. And we're now in a sort of post-Nietzschean, what's the word for it? God-forsaken world. Windwar says the hot potato immoral toss. Okay. This is the last. This is the last of these clips, and then maybe one more. We might wrap it up after that.
You had said that your thinking had evolved on changes in techniques. If you could tell me, when did your thinking begin to evolve on changing of techniques that you had referenced earlier?
Sometime, evolution is a process, as we know. I would say that when I was at PPLA, there was question marks about whether it was permissible to obtain tissue by using different techniques, because the legal regulations were not at all clear, and nor did they define things. By the time I was at PP Pasadena, many of us were moving in the direction of making this distinction between method and procedure and the method and technique. And so I was very comfortable at that time that the difference in technique doing a different technique, say aspiration versus manual aspiration versus electronic aspiration, did not really affect the procedure or the method, so was therefore permissible in terms of fetal tissue donation.
The problem with this tap dance? The law says no changes in the procedures, plural, used to terminate a pregnancy, the actual steps taken, not the procedure as a singular abstract concept. And the Planned Parenthood consent form? It promised the patients that nothing would change in the way they were treated. Planned Parenthood lies to their vulnerable patients, to government officials, and to the public who pays taxes to prop them up. It's time for them to face justice under the law.
Yeah, I mean, there she is. Oh, well, thinking evolves. When did your thinking change? Oh, well, thinking evolves, and it all gets very wishy-washy there, All of a sudden, things change from being solid to being very mutable, Everything's all very pliable and movable, and nothing can be known anymore. Nothing is concrete anymore, you understand, my guy. Everything's open to debate, and we're not sure, I learned another word, by the way, recently, and I think it's called something along the lines of, I'll have to check, but along the lines of mishnal, which sounds kind of like what it's like, mixing up. Everything becomes very indeterminate, all vague and mixed up and mishmashed. And this is their past masters. I mean, obviously, I think, most people listening to this are of the same mind as I am now, but maybe there's one or two exceptions. But anyway, I'm in no doubt now. You know them by their fruit. You don't need to look up any sections in Wikipedia. They don't need to have a Wikipedia entry anymore. I mean, now that you have eyes to see and ears to hear, they have the same accent even. How is it? Even though she might be living out in LA, she has that. It's like that. It's not like that New York song, but she has that New York state of mind, It's not really New York. But anyway, we won't go any closer than that. I've already been sailing quite close to the wind here. But yeah, it reminds me, I'll say this. It reminds me of that passage from a certain book about camping in the Black Forest. by the certain fellow who didn't apparently get accepted into art school and therefore took it out on the world. He wrote a passage about how this is what it's like arguing with these people. They say one thing, you present them with a fact that proves that they're lying, and then all of a sudden things get very mishal, very vague. It's like trying to nail jelly to a wall, isn't it? And again, with her body language, it's pretty clear with her defensive body language. And she's trying to purport an air of, I'm just trying to help. Just trying to help people to understand. Things are confusing, You must understand, like evolution, like the origin of the species, like things evolve. Our thinking evolves, Who's this our business? When were we consulted? Of course, we never were. Remind me to do a whole stream one day, or a video at the very least, on the Delphi method, or Delphi method, named after that place in Greece where the oracles resided, the high priestesses or whatever, But there's a method that they use called the Delphi method that purports to include everything in the decision-making process. But the decision is already a foregone conclusion. They just allow us to think that we've been participating in a debate about what should we do. And then scratch our heads and blink as they go, great, it's decided then, we're going to go ahead and do this. We've decided to go ahead and do this. That's the Delphi method, pretty much in a nutshell, but maybe I'll expand on that sometime. Now, I'm going to wrap it up, but I'm going to say that here's Kamala Harris, our esteemed vice presidentress, and she's with a load of women there, as you can see in the background. So they're all clapping, and she's promising them, A words for everybody and miniature American flags for everybody else. It's a planned humanhood party in San Francisco on May 31st, as far as I can read it there, 2019. So that may be a video that we have a look at another day. I'll see if I can leave links for various things there in the description. You might want to look at them in your own time. But just to let you know that she has been involved, but also to remind you that there is a video that came out on the Center for Medical Progress. That's the guy who's exposing what these practitioners of this A-word procedure are doing in their own words and in their own deeds. As far as I understand it, Marjorie Taylor Greene has now decided to lend her, I suppose, fame, political clout, however much of it she has, to lending some support to this cause also. So this, in that sense, it's a Democrat versus Republican thing. But look, it should be a human versus whoever's lost their humanity thing. I'll just check for a couple more comments now. Well, as Windwar says there, Camel Toe Harris. That's just to mention it there that she's involved, or has been. And I think what I'll do now is I'm going to play you one last short clip from a video that I did probably nearly 2 years ago now, certainly more than a year ago. And it was when Joe Biden had several people from a diverse, disparate range or subset, and what should I say, sampling of all, or as many as he could, people with different victimhood statuses, or what do they call it? Special, either unique or collection of intersectional, and what do they call them? Intersectional lived experiences in the, what do they call these people now? What's the category for anybody who's like a member of anything, whether it be, the type of skin you have, or the type of orientation sexually you have, all this sort of stuff. Various category boxes anyway. And one of them anyway, one of these heroes they had on, and wait till you see her, marching so heroically, and the way the camera slows it down and gives a sort of a slow motion effect for her. She's marching along. Maybe it's somewhere in LA, I can't remember for sure. And she's a student nurse, student doctoress, maybe I should say, and she wants to be an A-word ress, and she's smiling a lot. She thinks she's very clever. She's learned how to do it, and she's learned that a papaya is a very good representation of the uterus. And she wants to tell Joe Biden about it, and Joe Biden is fascinated about it. So there's a video on that, which I did a video about, but I'm just going to play a clip of that, and then I'll come back and we'll end on that. Danielle Mathisen. Now, maybe she's not a woman. I'm not being sarcastic when I say I don't want to misgender her. Maybe she isn't, but I think that she is being referred to as a woman, so I'll say she. And she talked about how they were not allowed, or they were prevented from learning or not being taught how to perform abortions in this university course which she studied, how to be an obstetrician gynecologist, OBGYN. She calls it a obgyn. So Biden says to her, I'm curious, how do you teach yourself how to perform abortions then? And she says, a papaya is a very good representation of a uterus, she says with a smirk. A uterus is Latin for a womb. And they love using this kind of clinical, clean language, I never would have thought that if you change the word for something, just use a different word for something, that it would make the idea of the thing sound any less pleasant or more pleasant. But it works. Shakespeare said a rose by any other name would smell as sweet. But in this generation, if you called a rose a steaming pile of dung, then people would think it smelled awful. And vice versa. Anyway, she says a papaya is a very good representation of a uterus. A womb, in other words, she says with a smirk. So they practice a ritual of scraping out the soft flesh from the inside of the fruit, which represents their wombs. This is exactly, literally what they're doing. Now, to be see how gosh darn proud she was of herself there, She wanted to laugh or smile or, look at Uncle Joe there and kind of ask him, aren't you proud of me? That's what I get from her facial expression at the end there. So that's Kamala or Kamala. Maybe it's Kamala. Affirmative action by 10 on crack. And she's been masquerading as a black woman. And I think a lot of black people are realizing now that she's a fraud in that regard. She comes from a family of rich Indians who had a plantation somewhere in the Caribbean. And she's neither been underprivileged nor bussed anywhere, nor discriminated against based on anything. But she has been wearing some kind of a version of stolen valor. And I think maybe a lot of black people are now angry about it. And I don't think she's popular with anybody. I think her lies only lasted so long. I mean, it really was a very superficial disguise that she was wearing. And she has aged considerably since before she took office and now. So the inept and the befuddled. I'm going to wrap it up there, except just to go back to this. I mean, look, I always say I'm going to do another part 2 and this, that, and the other, and I've always plans to do stuff. But I only ever do whatever I do in the here and now. So I'll just take this last opportunity just to repeat this, because I think it definitely is worth repeating. The more and more I found out about everything, about this world into which I was born, I'll be honest about it, the more I will admit that I wish that I never was born, because I can't stand it. I don't like humanity. Maybe there's some good people in the world, but a bit like the US Constitution, whatever good they were have done nothing to prevent all of the evil that has transpired in the world. And so as I won't call it wisdom, but as my knowledge has increased about everything, so has my sorrow and grief. I suppose I won't expand on it any more than that. I'm kind of trying to keep this up on YouTube. But it certainly is worth repeating. For in much wisdom is much grief, and he who increases knowledge increases sorrow. That's from Ecclesiastes chapter 1, verse 18. Look, I suppose in saying that, what I have often thought about as well is, and I should be mightily grateful that I appear to have been wanted. And my mother did tell me that I was wanted many times, and that was a lot more than I know a lot of people get out there. My mother could have been a crack addict, and she wasn't. She was not perfect, but she was a pretty good woman. And I'm glad that I told her that before she died. So look, I suppose everybody, I could be considered to be privileged. Anybody who's here is born, and they just have to get on with it. As difficult as that is, I'm not saying that I'm telling people to get on with it, because I often find it very difficult. So I'm admitting that to you, in case it seems like I'm breezing through this. I'm certainly not. And at the times that you don't hear from me, I'm usually not smiling. And in fact, since 2020, I don't want to smile at anybody in case they're one of the people who partook of the thing, or implemented, or enforced, or even abided enthusiastically with any of the rules or laws or mandates that they told us we had to abide by. I don't want to share a society with them at all. I want separate societies at the very least, separate civilizations, planets, if it were possible. But I have to say that I have to be grateful that I wasn't one of these poor innocent babies in the womb who just hears sounds and sees sort of blurry shapes, and then after a while I just feel this sharp pain and I'm being dismembered or kept intact, and they put on a cold stainless steel table so that I'm kept alive long enough for them to harvest whatever of my organs that they want to be put on ice and sent to whomever for whatever. And probably not, almost certainly not for a good reason, for a helpful reason, not to save somebody else's life. But I won't get into the details on it more than that. I'll have to leave it at that if I want any chance, I think, of this staying up. I'll finish on that, and I'll say thank you very much to everybody for listening. Just the last few comments here. Wind War says, I'm with you, John. I don't, or I didn't, have much faith in humanity either. Take care, friend. Thanks, Miss Maskless. Appreciate you listening. Endure, says Erastus. Thank you. I will if you promise to do the same. And you all do too. Erastus says, speak truth, no matter the cost. I agree. Don't let him take you alive, says Erastus. Yeah, I wouldn't end my own life because I wouldn't give them the pleasure. Turn to the cross, says Windwar, because we are only mortal after all, and eternity awaits. Well, whether it does or whether it doesn't, got to do the best that I can and try and suck it up, as in endure, and do the best that I can and find strength or energy from somewhere while I'm here. And Lily Gazoo says, we're all here for a reason. Maybe so. It would be very nice to think that our lives had meaning, will have had meaning, if we put our best foot forward and make our best efforts while we're here. Okay, that seems like a good enough coda. Thanks again very much to everybody for listening, and hopefully speak to you before too long.